next question, why history of science? That's HOS, is history of science, which is kind of what this talk is going to revolve around eventually. But why should we use historical episodes or historical stories or the history of science in science education?
Because it involves employers. The scientists back then had to use a lot of those skills in order to come up with some of the things that they did.
And so they realize what we know now isn't what we always knew. It was a ever-evolving process of adding more information and refining things.
And some of those scientists failed, and now they're succeeding. And I tell kids that all the time. Or not succeeding, but they became famous, but they failed quite a few times before they did.
The plastic nature of science.
What do you mean by that?
The atomic theory would be the first example I think of, where we go from Dalton's model of solid spheres of different masses for each element through J.J. Thomson. And so as new evidence comes up, the model changes.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of in line with that, it illustrates how sometimes convention is wrong. So it emphasizes the responsibility for personal inquiry and engagement. Right? It has to make sense to you because everybody else could be wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
Brings up discussion for the role of society in science and how society can influence the path of science and what's happening in science.
Now, a lot of the things that you guys are... Say it again.
And what is valued in science.
Okay. A lot of what you guys are talking about there at the end is related to the nature of science. I'm getting a feel for, we might be all on the same page about the nature of science. A lot of times when I give talks about the nature of science, we're not on the same page, which you'll get a feel for how we might not be on the same page in just a second. So, improved understanding of science content, and what you'll notice is that the reasons we do inquiry, a lot of the reasons that I came up with are the same for why we do history. And what you guys were actually talking about is improved nature of science, most of those last several comments. But also we have an improved understanding of the nature of the science content, because it's greater mental connections, because they're able to connect it to people, they're able to connect it to places, they're able to connect to their history learning, so the more connections we can make, which somebody earlier said, connecting brain cells, the more connections we can make to what they already know, the better they're going to have that content learned. Deeper processing. Going back to the gentleman's example about how the atomic model has changed over time from Dalton through Rutherford. If a student can wrestle with how those ideas changed and why those ideas changed, it really forces them to not just be able to say this is the atomic model, but to say why it's the atomic model. Motivating, they can see that scientists are a lot like them. I will never tell a student that they are being scientists. I think that we mislead them a little bit when we tell them that they are being scientists. I will say they are acting like scientists. Because a scientist has a lot more at their disposal. They have more knowledge. There's just a lot more going on in actual science world. Interesting and achievable. The achievable part is that kind of what she was talking about earlier is that scientists mess up, just like they mess up. Scientists didn't know the answer. It's not like just all of a sudden there it was. Although there are episodes in history of science where all of a sudden there it was. But they find the people to be interesting. I think Sheila Tobias in 1990 did a study of post-secondary science students who actually left the sciences. And the reason that they left was because they didn't see the people in the science. All there was facts, content to be memorized and learned. They didn't see how people work together. They don't find it interesting to just sit down with a book and memorize stuff. I actually had a student tell me once that a scientist is somebody who goes into a lab, repeats what other people have done to make sure that it's right. And why wouldn't they think that? We have them do cookbook labs where they repeat what was already been done to make sure that it works. So we send powerful messages, and the history of science can actually help us send more accurate messages. Multidisciplinary, history, reading, when they're reading short stories. I have my students do a lot of writing around the history of science. And then, of course, with inquiry in general, we have a lot of different skills that can be multidisciplinary. And then, of course, increased understanding of the nature of science.